The night was unusually still, but that quiet felt wrong to Stephen. From the shadows at the edge of the driveway, headlights flickered like the eyes of predators. He could see the faint outline of several figures moving in a coordinated pattern, their movements too deliberate to be random. Stephen's heart didn't race, it sharpened. He had seen situations like this before, and he knew instinct alone wasn't enough. He had to stay ahead. Inside the house, his family carried on as if nothing was happening. Laughter drifted from the living room, and the smell of dinner filled the air. They had no idea danger was inching closer, creeping toward them with silent precision. Stephen could feel the tension building in the air, the kind that makes hairs stand on end, and every small sound echo unnaturally. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone, moving quietly through the hallway, was the first barrier between his family and the unknown threat. Stephen's eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, every potential point of entry. He noted the gaps in the fence, the areas where the weak light made movements invisible, and the subtle signs that someone had been there earlier, testing boundaries. These weren't amateurs. This was organized, calculated. They were trying to trap his family, and they believed they had the advantage. They didn't know Stephen had already anticipated them. He moved silently to the window, peering out at the dark figures. Each man outside had a purpose, a target, and a role. But Stephen had prepared for this. He had mapped out the exits, memorized the terrain, and set his mind to remain calm under pressure. He wasn't just waiting, he was already acting, planning the moves that would keep his family safe. Stephen checked on his family one last time. His partner was in the kitchen, unaware of the danger, and his children were laughing in the living room, oblivious. He allowed himself a single deep breath, steadying his mind. The intruders thought they were about to walk into an easy situation. They didn't know the house, the yard, or the man inside. The first faint sound of movement outside the back door made Stephen's muscles tighten. This was it. The moment when planning met action. He knew every second counted. That hesitation could cost someone's life. The night was no longer quiet. Danger had arrived, but so had Stephen, ready to turn the threat into an opportunity to protect what mattered most. Inside the house, life felt normal, almost too normal. The warm glow of lamps reflected off the walls, casting long shadows, but the family didn't notice. Laughter and chatter filled the air, the sound of plates clinking against each other, the aroma of dinner still lingering from the kitchen. To anyone walking past, this was a peaceful home, safe, familiar, ordinary, but Stephen knew better. He could sense the tension that wasn't visible, the threat lingering just beyond the doors and windows. His partner hummed a tune while cleaning up, completely unaware of the danger creeping closer. The children ran around the living room, their energy spilling over the furniture, toys scattered in disarray. Their innocence was tangible, their joy untainted. It was exactly what the intruders were counting on, the assumption that nobody would be prepared, that this would be an easy target. Stephen's jaw tightened as he observed them, the weight of responsibility settling squarely on his shoulders. He moved silently between the rooms, a careful observer. Every glance, every small action was measured. The children's laughter rang through the house, but it was punctuated by the subtle noises outside. A branch snapping underfoot, the faint hum of an engine, shadows shifting along the fence line. Stephen noted each sound, each irregularity, cataloging the movements like a mental map of the danger closing in. His family's vulnerability made him sharper, more focused. He didn't have the luxury of fear, he had only the precision of action. The children sat on the rug, their eyes bright, completely unaware of what was approaching. One of them grabbed a toy and tossed it across the room, laughing at a game only they could see. Stephen's partner poured a glass of water, moving with casual ease, not realizing how precarious the situation had become. The contrast between the mundane warmth of the family and the deadly seriousness lurking outside made every second feel heavier. Stephen crouched briefly behind the sofa, scanning all exits, memorizing sight lines, and checking potential vulnerabilities. Every window, every door, every entry point had to be accounted for. The safety of these people The people he loved depended entirely on his awareness and foresight. They trusted the world to remain ordinary, but the ordinary had already shifted. Tonight their home could have become a trap. He looked at their faces, the carefree smiles, the small gestures of affection between them, and his resolve hardened. Nothing would happen to them. Not tonight. His mind raced with contingencies, backup plans and distractions that could be used if the intruders tried to force their way in. Every quiet step, every shifted shadow, was another layer of protection he silently added around them. Stephen's presence was both invisible and palpable. The family didn't know it, but they were already being shielded. Every instinct, every ounce of training, and every careful observation was working in unison to ensure that what could have been a night of chaos remained a night of normalcy. For them, laughter and warmth still reigned. For Stephen, the weight of responsibility pressed down, and the battle had already begun, even if no one outside yet knew it. The first sound of forced movement outside made Stephen's muscles tighten. The intruders had reached the edge of the property, testing the doors and windows as if to see how easy it would be to slip inside. But Stephen was already in position, every sense alert, every instinct engaged. He moved quietly through the hallway, keeping low, staying in the shadows, but fully visible to the eyes trained to read danger. He didn't need to yell or panic. Presence alone could be enough to unsettle them. The front door rattled slightly, a subtle but unmistakable warning. Stephen's partner froze mid-step, sensing a sudden shift in energy without understanding why. The children paused their game, listening intently to the subtle noises that didn't belong. Stephen positioned himself between the intruders and his family, a living shield, and waited for the right moment to act. He wasn't going to charge blindly. Timing was everything. Through the partially obscured window, he could see their silhouettes. 5. Figures moving in sync, clearly trained, confident, expecting minimal resistance. They hadn't anticipated someone inside watching, someone who knew the house as intimately as the furniture itself. Stephen's mind calculated every possibility, every escape route, every advantage. He knew exactly how to manipulate the environment to his favor. A loud bang on the door finally made the household flinch. Stephen stepped forward, his voice calm but firm, carrying authority without shouting. "Stop right there. You're in the wrong place." The intruders froze momentarily, caught off guard by the sudden human response. His tone wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be. It was precise, measured. A single statement that made clear he was aware of their intentions and capable of acting on them. They tried to force the door anyway, but Stephen had anticipated it. The door held firm against their push, reinforced, with locks and barriers he had prepared earlier. Every step they took outside, he mirrored with countermeasures inside. Shadows cast at the right angles, subtle movements that made them unsure of what awaited. Confusion set in among the intruders. What had seemed like an easy target was now anything but. Stephen's family watched from behind furniture, their fear tempered by the knowledge that he was in control. He moved silently but decisively, positioning himself near the hallway, covering multiple points of entry. Each movement was deliberate, each breath measured. The intruders' confidence faltered as they realized the house was no longer a simple target. One of them tried to shout, trying to assert dominance, but Stephen's calm, unwavering gaze met the threat. They weren't just fighting a man. They were confronting someone who had prepared, anticipated, and was fully ready to turn the situation against them. Every push, every step, every sound was a test, and Stephen was passing them all, keeping his family out of reach and forcing the attackers to reconsider their plan. The intruders froze for a long moment, sensing that their simple trap had been transformed into a calculated challenge. Stephen stayed silent, letting their uncertainty grow, positioning himself to take full advantage of the hesitation. The first move had been theirs, but the counter was already in place. Stephen knew the intruders had assumed the upper hand the moment they stepped onto his property. Their confidence was visible in their posture, their synchronized movements, the way they spread out as if the house was already theirs. But what they didn't know was that Stephen had spent years training for situations exactly like this. He had studied how to manipulate environments, anticipate threats, and turn perceived disadvantages into strengths. Tonight, his home wasn't just a place of comfort. It was a battlefield, and every detail worked for him. He moved silently along the hallway, using shadows to obscure his presence while keeping an unobstructed view of the windows and doors. Every step was deliberate, measured to avoid creating sounds that could give away his position. At the same time, he positioned household objects, furniture, chairs, even rugs, to act as subtle barriers. If an intruder tried to push through, these seemingly ordinary items would slow them, buying critical seconds. The intruders didn't see the preparation, but they would feel the consequences. Outside, the attackers shifted uneasily. One of them, trying to peer inside, noticed movement that didn't belong, flickers of shadow, sudden reflections, the faintest shift of curtains. It was enough to plant a seed of doubt. Stephen used that uncertainty, moving with silent precision, watching how they reacted. Each hesitation, each glance around, was an opportunity. He didn't rush. He controlled the pace, letting their own uncertainty create a tactical advantage. He had memorized every line of sight, every potential entry point. A single glance told him who might try to breach a window, who might attempt the back door, who was positioned as lookout. He adjusted his strategy accordingly, ensuring that if they moved, they would move into disadvantage. He wasn't just reacting, he was orchestrating the flow of the encounter. Inside the living room, his partner and children remained safely behind reinforced barriers he had set. Their presence was protected but also motivated him. Every movement, every calculated pause was designed to keep them out of sight and out of harm's way. Even a single misstep could have catastrophic consequences. He moved objects to create subtle obstacles, nudged doors slightly ajar to misdirect, and used the reflection of light from lamps and windows to confuse the attacker's perception. From the hallway, Stephen could see their faces through the glass. The initial boldness was giving way to caution. They had expected compliance, perhaps even fear, but Stephen showed neither. His calm, deliberate actions were disarming them, forcing them to overthink. A small tactical adjustment, a subtle repositioning, and their confidence eroded further. They were no longer dictating the situation. Stephen was. The attackers tried a coordinated push toward the main entrance. Stephen anticipated it, creating a distraction that diverted two of them while simultaneously reinforcing the access point with makeshift barriers. Every move was deliberate, calculated, and designed to keep his family safe while subtly undermining the intruder's plan. He was no longer defending passively. He was turning the environment itself into a tool of strategy. As minutes passed, the intruders became visibly frustrated, unsure of what they were dealing with. Their plan, once simple, now required reconsideration at every step. Stephen stayed, calm, methodical, unhurried. Every moment that passed increased his advantage, while their indecision grew. They had expected an easy target. Instead, they faced a calculated mind, a controlled environment, and the unshakable presence of someone who would not allow harm to touch his family. Stephen's tactical advantage was absolute. He had turned the home, the shadows, the smallest details, into weapons without ever raising his voice. The intruders, now uncertain and exposed, had no idea that each hesitation, each misstep, was orchestrated to make their own aggression work against them. The trap they had set was unraveling, and Stephen had all the control. The situation outside was intensifying, and Stephen knew the intruders were growing impatient. What had started as cautious probing was quickly becoming aggressive. They had realized the house wasn't going to surrender easily. Stephen's mind raced as he observed their movements, noting the smallest tells. A shift in weight, a hand brushing against a pocket, eyes scanning for alternative entrances. Every signal was a piece of the puzzle, and he was already 3 steps ahead. Inside, his family remained behind the protective barriers he had reinforced earlier. His partner's eyes darted nervously toward the windows, while the children clung to each other, sensing that something was wrong. Stephen's calm presence was the only buffer between them and the escalating danger. He knew he had to act decisively, but also precisely. One wrong move could turn hesitation into chaos, but any hesitation on his part would be catastrophic. The intruders attempted a more coordinated push, splitting into two groups. One tried to force open a side door while the other circled to the front. Stephen had anticipated this. Using subtle sounds, tapping lightly on walls, moving furniture slightly, he manipulated their perception of space. Each movement was intentional, designed to mislead and confuse without revealing his exact position. Their confidence began to falter. Stephen's eyes scanned the family. They were watching, but unaware of the full extent of the danger. He gestured subtly, guiding them to move behind the sofa, crouching low while keeping their line of sight minimal. Their survival depended not just on his skill but on their trust in him. They had to remain calm, and he had to embody that calm, projecting control even as the threat escalated. The intruders grew frustrated, voices rising, movements becoming more erratic. They had expected fear, compliance, or panic. Instead, they were met with quiet control and calculated resistance. Stephen knew this was the turning point. Confidence would crack faster than weapons could inflict harm. The balance was shifting. He created a diversion by knocking over a small lamp in a distant room. The noise drew the attention of half the intruders, who moved to investigate. Stephen used this moment to reposition himself closer to the main entrance, ensuring he had sightlines on both groups. His family, now aware of the pattern, stayed perfectly still, following his instructions without needing words. The tension in the house rose, thick as smoke, but Stephen's calm dictated the rhythm. One intruder tried a bold move, reaching for the front door handle. Stephen had anticipated this. A quick, precise maneuver blocked the entry without exposing himself. The intruder's balance faltered, giving Stephen the advantage. Within moments, the intruders realized they were no longer in control. The situation had flipped entirely. Stephen's preparation, observation, and calm decision-making had turned what could have been disaster into a strategic advantage. The intruders hesitated, uncertainty overtaking aggression. Every attempt to regain dominance only further exposed them. Stephen guided his family step by step, each movement deliberate, moving them toward a secure interior room while isolating the attackers in areas of disadvantage. The house itself became a maze for the intruders, every obstacle a silent ally to Stephen's strategy. Have you ever had to think fast to protect someone you care about? By the time the intruders realized what had happened, it was too late. Their simple plan had been dismantled without chaos, without panic, and without harm to those he was protecting. Stephen had not only defended his family, he had taken control, reversed the threat, and created a scenario where the intruders' own movements worked against them. Each intruder's hesitation grew as the realization set in: they were outmatched, not by force but by foresight, preparation, and calm precision. Stephen's focus never wavered. His family's safety was absolute, and every calculated step had ensured it. He had turned what could have been an overwhelming threat into an opportunity to neutralize danger while protecting the ones he loved. In those moments, the lines between defense and counteraction blurred. Stephen's tactical advantage was complete. The intruders, once confident and aggressive, now acted with caution, unsure of the environment and unable to regain momentum. The home had shifted from a place of potential vulnerability to a fortress of controlled advantage, all because one person had anticipated the moves of the aggressors and turned fear into strategy. The intruders were beginning to realize they had underestimated the situation. Their movements, once bold and coordinated, were now cautious, hesitant. Stephen watched their every action, calculating, predicting, waiting for the perfect moment to shift from defense to control. He had prepared for this, not just to protect, but to neutralize the threat entirely before it could escalate. He moved silently through the hallway, positioning himself at the point where he could observe all entrances. His eyes flicked from the front door to the side windows, noting every shadow, every slight movement. He was aware of the intruder's blind spots, their overconfidence, their expectation of chaos. Every miscalculation on their part became a tool he could use to regain control. Inside, his family remained quietly behind reinforced barriers. They trusted him implicitly, unaware of the full depth of danger, yet their calm gave Stephen the clarity to act. Every step he took was precise. He wasn't acting out of panic. He was acting from preparation, experience, and an unshakable focus on the objective. Remove the threat while keeping his family unharmed. One of the intruders attempted to force open a rear window. Stephen anticipated this. With a single, controlled movement, he blocked their access and forced them to hesitate. Their aggressive energy was replaced by uncertainty. Their communication became rushed and fragmented, revealing cracks in coordination. Stephen used this to his advantage, positioning himself strategically to isolate each intruder from the others. Another tried to move toward the living room, thinking the family might be exposed. Stephen intercepted with calm authority, ensuring that the intruder's path was blocked without confrontation escalating into chaos. Every small maneuver shifted the intruder's confidence into doubt. The situation, once theirs, was now entirely Stephen's control. He used the house itself to neutralize the threat. Furniture created barriers, doors channeled movement, and subtle distractions, like a strategically placed reflection of light, kept the intruders guessing. Their confidence faltered, their aggression turned into caution. Stephen stayed low, alert, and ready. Each intruder's overextension became a chance to block, redirect, or contain, without giving them the opportunity to strike. The intruders realized they were trapped by circumstance more than force. They had expected an easy target, but every decision they made now worked against them. Stephen maintained control without shouting or exposing himself, letting their own missteps create opportunities. One by one, the intruders' momentum broke. Hesitation replaced aggression, and panic began to seep in. Finally, the moment came. Stephen guided the intruders toward positions where they could be safely contained. Each step was measured, ensuring that his family remained protected. Their own movements, combined with the environment Stephen had orchestrated, left them no choice but to pause and submit. The threat had been neutralized, not with reckless violence, but with strategy, observation, and unwavering focus. By the time law enforcement arrived, the intruders were immobilized by their own uncertainty. Stephen's family remained safe, intact, and largely unaware of the intensity of the encounter. The house, once vulnerable, now stood as a fortress, and the intruders had been rendered powerless, all without unnecessary escalation or harm. The danger was over, the balance restored, and Stephen's control absolute. The last intruder lingered near the hallway, uncertain, tense. Stephen could see the hesitation in his posture, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. This was the final move. The moment when the aggressors realized they were outmatched. Every step Stephen had taken, every calculated pause, every misdirection now converged on this single point, ensuring the threat ended without harm to his family. He advanced deliberately, making his presence known without panic or aggression. His voice was calm, steady, carrying authority that needed no amplification. "It's over," he said. "Step away or you won't leave at all." There was no shouting, no dramatics, just the certainty of someone who knew the situation better than anyone else in the room. The intruder froze, unsure if the threat was bluff or precision. Stephen moved with purpose, shadowing the man's path while keeping the family safely behind barricades. Every object in the room, every corner, every line of sight had been accounted for. The intruder's confidence eroded with each step, his options narrowing until the house itself felt like a trap. Stephen didn't need to make contact. The environment, combined with his presence, neutralized aggression before it could manifest. A sudden movement from the intruder, an attempt to regain momentum, was met by Stephen's swift, controlled intervention. Without striking, he blocked access, guided the intruder toward containment, and maintained full control of the scenario. The man realized he had been outmaneuvered, forced to reconsider every step he had taken. Fear replaced arrogance. Caution replaced aggression. The family watched quietly, their hearts pounding, but their faith in Stephen unshaken. The children clutched each other, while his partner followed subtle cues, remaining protected without fully understanding the scope of the situation. Stephen's calmness radiated through the room, giving them a sense of security even amidst chaos. The intruder attempted one final bluff, trying to assert dominance, but Stephen anticipated it. Using the space strategically, he redirected the movement, cutting off avenues of escape and forcing compliance without unnecessary conflict. Each calculated step, each slight shift in positioning, transformed the intruder's momentum into containment. Finally, the man halted completely. His hands went up instinctively, signaling surrender. Stephen maintained eye contact, letting him feel the absolute control without aggression. The threat had been neutralized, not through recklessness, not through blind force, but through preparation, observation, and precise execution. As the adrenaline slowly ebbed from the room, Stephen ensured his family remained unharmed, intact, and reassured. The house, once a target, now stood as a fortress of strategy and protection. Outside, the distant sound of approaching authorities confirmed the finality of the confrontation. The danger was contained, the intruder's power dissolved into compliance. Stephen exhaled, tension leaving his body. His family emerged from their positions, eyes wide but relieved. They were safe. The last threat had been neutralized and the balance restored. In that quiet, victorious moment, the household felt the weight of what had just been overcome, the successful defense of everything Stephen held most precious. The house was quiet now, the storm outside having mirrored the chaos that had just passed within. Stephen's family slowly emerged from behind their protective positions, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Every heartbeat still carried the echoes of tension, but the danger was gone. The intruders had been contained, and the immediate threat had dissolved. Stephen moved through the rooms, checking that every barrier he had set remained intact, confirming that his family was unharmed. His partner finally exhaled, wrapping an arm around the children, grateful for their safety, but shaken by how close it had come. Silence settled, broken only by the faint patter of rain on the windows. It was a calm after a storm, a moment to process the intensity of what had just occurred. He took a seat at the edge of the living room, his mind replaying every movement, every decision, every moment that had turned potential disaster into control. Reflection was necessary, not just to understand what had happened, but to ensure that if such a threat arose again, he would respond with the same precision and calm. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by clarity. Lessons had been learned. Preparation had saved them, but so had quick thinking. The children slowly approached, still holding each other, still seeking reassurance. Stephen knelt to their level, brushing hair from their faces and speaking softly. "You're safe now. Nothing can reach you here." His calmness grounded them, and in that grounding, the family began to regain a sense of normalcy. Outside, law enforcement had begun securing the area, and the intruders were in custody. Stephen watched from a window, knowing that the risk had been fully neutralized. But inside, the more profound challenge was emotional, helping his family process the fear, the tension, and the reality that their safety had depended entirely on his ability to anticipate, act, and think clearly under pressure. Do you think preparation or quick thinking is more important in a crisis? As the minutes passed, Stephen reflected on how every choice, every detail had mattered. From positioning barriers to anticipating the intruder's moves, from maintaining calm to directing his family safely, each element had combined to prevent harm. In the aftermath, it became clear, true resilience wasn't about strength alone. It was about strategy, foresight, and composure. In that quiet, reflective moment, the family gathered together, sharing a simple, profound understanding. They had survived, and they had done so because of courage, planning, and unshakable trust. The house, once a potential vulnerability, now stood as a testament to control, foresight, and the unbreakable bond of family.